Hi, Adam. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Angel, thank you so much for having me today. I'm happy to be on the other side of the microphone today.
Thank you for jumping on this show. It's the second episode, and you heard it's a pleasure to have you.
Again, thank you so much for having me. You've been instrumental in my business over the years and managing, not just managing my website, but being very proactive, always giving ideas, coming up with solutions, being there to problem solve. And I just want to say thank you for all of your help and your support over the years.
I really, really appreciate that. So for those who don't know who Adam is the founder and president of NHB Talent Group, co-founder of Probably Nothing Talent, and the host of the podcast. So, Adam, let's just start from your early career. And I know personally about your story, and I think it's really powerful what you did there, and it's a great comeback story. But let's just go back again to your early days so that everyone here has a context.
Yeah, I'll give you my story real quick. First and foremost, thank you, and again, hello to your audience. And for those who I haven't had the pleasure to meet, it's great to connect on podcasts and get to know everyone. So my story, real quick. Born and raised New Yorker, lived in New York my entire life, and when I was in college, I always wanted to get into business and advertising, and that's exactly what I did. So the first 15 years of my career, I worked at different advertising agencies in New York. A number of brands as well. I worked at American Express. I worked at Sirius XM satellite radio. And the last stop before I pivoted and changed my career, I was working at VaynerMedia for the great Gary Vaynerchuk. About 6-7 months in, I realized that it wasn't the ideal job. There were some situations going on there, and the grass was not greener on the other side, and I ended up ultimately losing my job. And in hindsight, it was the best thing to ever happen to me. But Angela, during that time, it was the worst. I didn't know. I was 35 at the time. I didn't know what I was going to do with my career. It was throwing my life into a complete storm. I had a young daughter at the time. We just bought a house, and I needed to figure out what was next for me. And that was a truly difficult time. And on that last day at VaynerMedia, I had a good relationship with Gary. I still have a good relationship with him now. He said the most important words to me. He said, stop focusing on the things that you suck at and double down on your strengths. And we sat there for a little bit and we talked about what I'm good at, what I'm not so good at. And all signs pointed towards the world of recruiting. Recruiting is a career where if you have a strong network, if you're persuasive, if you really are a good listener and you can listen and understand, you can be very successful and very lucrative. And that's what I did. That's exactly what I did. So after I lost my job, I had a bit of a tough time, putting my head around where I wanted to be. But I went down the road of recruiting, and I did my due diligence, and I reached out to every recruiter that I've ever worked with before, and I met with them and I spoke to them, and I really tried to understand what recruiting was all about before I ever even did it. And luckily for me, I aligned with a great company called Onward Search, who understood that the value that I'm bringing is relationships. But it was tough. I had to start from the bottom. I had to start from ground zero and build my way up.
Yeah. So let's just talk about the time period where you were actually making that transition. So you did that at the age of 35. You must have going through a lot of confusions over the options that you have to move forward in your career. And what all problems did you face? What were all confusions that you faced? And how did you actually came out of it?
Yeah, it was tough. I think the hardest thing for me was wrapping my head around the fact that I was going to be starting, at 35 years old, starting as, the bottom of the company, as someone with no experience. And that was really hard to wrap my head around. And I had to, be humble. I had to be open and just know that I had all those skills behind me to really do well in this. And that's exactly what happened. And trust myself and bet on myself. And I bet big.
Mm-hmm. Also, I've listened to your other episodes on other podcasts. So you mentioned several times that you're not the same Adam you are today. And so what kind of person were you before, and what made you transition into what you are now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think prior to losing my job, I would kind of hide my faults or not think about them or not try to improve upon them and just try to push forward, which isn't always the best thing to do. And those faults would always come back to haunt me and bite me in the end. And then after I lost my job, I truly understood what self-awareness was. And I had this self-awareness epiphany around accountability. to really own my losses, to really say, you know what, I screwed up. I didn't do well in that. And how am I going to move forward? And I move forward by doubling down on my strengths. And that's what really led to my success today.
That's awesome. Also, you just mentioned that you worked with Gary Vee. So were you directly working with him, and what was the experience like working with him?
Yeah, I did. I worked on a bunch of new business with him, and I was lucky because I had a front row seat to watch him, do business development, interact, the way he operates, and he's certainly a very unique person because there's not really many people who could go into a formal business meeting where everyone's wearing, dress clothes, suits, and he's in there in a hoodie, sweatshirt, and a baseball hat. And he's able to do that and command the room and really listen and do his own thing. And the one thing I will say about Gary, and he doesn't need me to defend him, he doesn't need me to stick up for him, but with Gary is what you see is what you get. He means what he says, and he says what he means. And he's just been a tremendous ally to me in my journey. And, to this day, 8 years later, he still gives me the time and attention whenever I see him, and I appreciate him.
That's awesome. And you had Gary Vee on your show as well. When you're getting him next on the show again?
It's coming. It's going to be in early 2023. It's coming. It's in the works.
That's awesome. Really looking forward to that. And while you were actually starting out with your new recruiting business, what was the number one problem that you faced, and how did you solve it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I were talking about this offline. The hardest part with any new business, anybody starting a new business, is being able to keep your eye on servicing your current clients, making sure that you're delivering, and at the same time doing business development. You have to be doing almost equal parts of both and figuring out how to split your time and split your energy and split your bandwidth, because the moment you stop focusing on business development is the moment that pipeline of new business opportunity dries up, and you never want that to happen. I learned that early on in my career, and I vowed to never have that happen again, where there was little to no opportunities coming through because I was so focused on the business. And I think that's really hard for any business owner.
And now that you actually have a successful recruiting business, you have started another recruiting business. It's a Web3 recruiting business, probably Nothing Talent, with Kevin Logan Jr. And so for me, I'm completely unaware about the Web3 world. So is Web2 and Web3 recruiting different? And can you just elaborate on that?
It is. Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand the differences, and I'll keep it really simple. So Web 1, if we go back to the beginning of the internet, the AOL, the Prodigy days, we were consuming. We weren't really interacting with the internet. I'm sure there was emails, but it wasn't where we are today. And we call that Web 1, where we're consuming. Web 2, which is where most people are familiar with right now, is creation. You think about the TikTok generation, the Instagram, the influencers out there, they're creating tons of content. Web 3 is all about ownership. Right? In Web 2, you're an Instagram influencer. You put something on Instagram. Instagram owns it. Web 3, when you're using blockchain technology, that piece that you create, that content, you own it. It lives on the blockchain because you created it, and you could choose what to do with it. You could sell it. You could transfer it. You could give it away, whatever you want to do. And those built-in contracts are called smart contracts that live on the blockchain. Those are the elements that define what that piece of creative, what that piece of content. It could be a mortgage for a house. It could be a deed for a business. It could be legal stuff. That is a transformation because it's about ownership and accountability and decentralized, right? All the stuff on the blockchain lives in the ether in a decentralized world, because right now in Web 2, some things stay with the bank. Things stay with on a certain platform. And that's what the core difference is. So recruiting is very different in Web3 because the talent that you're looking for, first and foremost, they're relatively new. There's not a million people with a ton of experience in certain areas. So you have to find people who have a certain level of experience and certain people who have those transferable skills from Web 2 to Web 3.
And I also observed that after starting the Web3 recruiting business, you have started to go out and speak on public events and working on your personal brand. And you have been there on LinkedIn posting about a lot of stuff. So,
yeah.
So what do you actually think about, growing a personal brand and how it's important for recruiting business, which is not a very online business, I think. So can you elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, especially on LinkedIn, it's critical if you have a business is to put out content. And I don't really love the expression personal brand. It's more about just branding, and it's more just about reputation, and that's what it's all about. So we have an opportunity now to have a mass amount of eyeballs and attention. So you really need to think about what do I know? What do I know well? And put yourself out there and create content, create thought leadership pieces, comment on things that are happening in your industry, in the news. Put out content where you're supporting others, where you're lifting others up. And that's what's really going to get the attention for clients and candidates.
Got it. And this podcast is targeted for the young people out there. So I'm sure that there will be many who are trying to get their first job or want to get a job at a dream company. And so I've never been through the process of being recruited. So what does the process looks like, and what can one do to increase their chances to get a dream job of theirs? And what things are considered important, and what things actually make a difference?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that too. So I think that if you're an active job seeker, let's start with people who are active. We'll call them an active job seeker. I think it's important to leverage and build your network. For example, it's okay to apply for a job through the traditional website, but what you really need to do is network, and network smartly. And network doesn't mean connecting with the head of human resources or recruiting at a company, but engaging with folks that work in that company across social media, across Twitter, across LinkedIn. Get involved with their conversations, add valuable content, meaningful content into that conversation flow. Because what's going to happen is once you apply, and hopefully you could leverage that relationship to say, hey, Angela, I applied at your organization. Hopefully, you'd be able, if inclined, to, potentially put in a good word. That's one way to do it. And really, you want to optimize that LinkedIn profile. So when recruiters like myself are searching, whether it be, certain keywords, very clear on what you do in that organization, it's a billboard for you. It's a free billboard, LinkedIn. So use it well, and use it smart. The other thing that I always tell people, if a recruiter reaches out to you, even if you're not looking for a job, and it sounds a little bit interesting, just a little bit, and you have some time, take that phone call. Take that half-hour phone call, because you never know. You never know what opportunity that's going to be. And at the very least, if it's not the right opportunity, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to form a connection with that recruiter that will now, after this conversation, have a good idea of what you're looking for and keep you in mind. And number two, it's going to give you practice in interviewing, right? People don't think about that, right? So then the next time a recruiter calls an opportunity that you really want, and you start to have those conversations, you will already have the experience and the practice before that call. So little things like that.
That's awesome. And what's the number one mistake that freshers make while applying for jobs, internships, etc.?
The number one mistake, that's a good one. I think it's just being a passive interviewer. I think it's just applying to a million different jobs instead of being focused. I think people need to really focus and say, here's a target list of the top 10 to 20 companies that I want to work with. Let me come up with a strategy. Let me make sure I'm applying to the right open jobs, and let me make sure I'm networking versus applying all over the place. I think you need to stay focused, and I think you need to stay organized. I think you also need to track where you applied and where you are in each one of those processes, so you could gauge your performance. What am I doing right? Do I need to course correct? Do I need to adjust anything? Am I getting negative feedback on my resume? If I'm getting negative feedback or no feedback, how do I adjust it? Remember, if you keep doing something the same way and you're not getting the same results, you need to change something. That's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, you gotta optimize.
Yes.
So now you are here. You have two recruiting businesses, and from working at corporate for 15 years, you have built up a successful business. But how was the podcast born? How did you actually got into podcasting?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was 2019. It was early 2019. And it was, there was a bunch of podcasts that were coming out around HR and recruiting. And I really didn't think any of them were that great. And I always had this kind of interest in doing a show. I was inspired. There's a great broadcaster here in the States called Howard Stern. I'm not sure how popular Howard Stern is in India, but Howard Stern is very popular here. And I used to work at the same company with him. And I always kind of had this interest and desire to do a show. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to try it. So the first show that I did, I recorded over Zoom with one of my LinkedIn contacts, a gentleman by the name of Q. And as we say, the rest is history. And for me, the show is a passion. It is an art. It is a craft. It is a thought leadership, content creation vehicle. It is a business development tool where I could reach out to folks that I want to do business with. And instead of sending them a cold email or a cold phone call, I'm able to invite them onto my show and have a meaningful conversation with them and develop a relationship and eventually ask for their business.
Mm-hmm. So that's a really great strategy right there. Getting your potential customers out there on your show, and then converting them into getting business. So that's a really great strategy out there. So I think that podcasting is such a great way to have conversations with people you admire, and you would otherwise you had no chance to talk with them for half an hour and pick their brains.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to youngsters out there who are starting a podcast and want to grow it just like me? What advice would you give?
Podcasting is hard, and I'm going to give the advice that your first podcast guest, Jordan Paris, gave to me when I asked him the same question. And he said, set goals and push yourself. Jordan said to me, set a goal of 50. Push yourself to 50 podcasts. And when I first started, I'm like, damn, I can't even imagine recording 50. And I made it, and I pushed it, and I made it to 50. And then I set my goal to 100, and then I set my goal to 200. And I'm right about to record my second. I'm about to record my 250th episode in a couple of weeks. So it's pretty exciting.
That's really awesome. So you have been podcasting for like 2 or 3 years now. How has podcasting changed your life? What are the top 2 benefits of podcasting that have changed your life?
Number one, I think it has built my confidence. And when I talk to people not on the podcast, when I talk to clients, when I talk to candidates, I'm able to be more confident in my approach. And number 2, it's absolutely the business development relationships. I've been able to develop and foster such business. And actually, one more third thing, I found my art. I found my passion. I found something that I really enjoy doing and creating as my canvas. And that's what the show is all about.
That's awesome. And also, I know that, you're all about making long-term relationships. You talk about it almost everywhere, and you've been talking about it for a really, really long time. Yes. So for someone who is just kind of starting out and doesn't know anyone in that space, how would you actually go about making relationships, getting mentors, and finding your tribe? So for example, someone like me, I'm in India and I want to make friends out there in the US, let's say, who are in X industry. How would I do it?
Networking is all about making the first move. Networking is putting yourself out there. And I think that the key word in a networking relationship is the word invaluable. How do I provide somebody with value without asking for something in return? How do I ask for something? How do I give you something first before asking for something? How do I build that relationship? Because so many people out there, you connect with them on LinkedIn, and the first thing they do is they're going to pitch you their business instead of truly just, taking the time to understand your business first, understand your needs, and give something in return.
So you have worked for 15 years in the corporate world. You have work experience in the network and mentors and friends in the industry. And using them, you just mentioned that you were able to pivot at the age of 35 and you made it a successful business. You became an entrepreneur. But what if it wasn't that case? What if you were just 17, 18 years old and you have no network, no friends, but only the skill and knowledge? How would you actually make it? How would you become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, that's a crazy question. I think it all starts with understanding that there's a need for whatever your skill set or your business is, to really understand that need and kind of reverse engineer the process. Who needs my product? Where are they? Where are they consuming content? Where are they engaging? And that's where I want to be, and that's where I would start.
Got it. That's a really actionable advice out there. All right, so those were all the questions from my side today. Thanks for jumping on. And it was great to have you on the show. For those who might want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, it's awesome, Anshul. Thank you so much for having me. And anybody that wants to check out the podcast, they could go check out the site that Anshul manages at thepodcast.com. You can connect with me and check me out on LinkedIn at Adam J. Posner. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today.